Hey, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, a podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and anybody else that we happen to come up with. Whether you're a bourbon fan, a geek, a casual observer, or someone just floating through this channel, I hope you find it interesting. If you get here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully, I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll try to get that taken care of. I also generally live stream the recording of these episodes on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or Twitter with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today is November the 17th, and we're going to be talking about brand mysticism and Dunce whiskey. And I'll start with the book. I'm a little more familiar with that. It's a fantastic book, and I'm a generally pretty avid and voracious reader, and I like books that I can consume quickly. And I was like, oh, sweet, I'm going to get a copy of this book. I'm going to kind of burn through it and then derive a bunch of questions. And I got maybe 30 or 40 pages into the book and realized I'm going to have to take my time with this. I'm going to have to really kind of marinate on it. And that's a compliment. It may sound like a backhanded compliment. It's not. I've worked in digital product development and management for last, over 10 years. And reading through this is, while brand mysticism may be around some spirits and other things, it feels like a manifesto to art, advertising, creativity, branding type people. There feels like there's so much more there. One of the most difficult things in my job is naming things. I don't know if you guys experience this or not, but the name, brand mysticism. I have my thoughts of mysticism, but is there intent behind the name? Like when we just start at the very beginning?
Absolutely, there's intent with the name. I mean, I feel like what's interesting about it's taken me. I've been in business for 34 years, and it's taken me almost that long to realize that I have a very strange process in my creativity, and it's not linear, and it's not scientific. It is indeed mystical and spiritual, and I think that thankfully, I through the talents of Aaron Goldfarb, he helped me articulate and put it down on paper what it is, the process that we go through.
That's exactly where I landed on this, right? And so, I did the nerd thing, and you think of a word, you're like, all right, let's go look up the definition of the word, and you got to get maybe to the second or third definition before you hit it. But this idea of mysticism being a spiritual understanding of something that is not necessarily knowledge that's accessible by your intellect, right? And you're describing that exactly. Your process is not linear, and you call it strange. And I would challenge, at least in my thought process, is that it's probably more normal than you might think, but the historical implementation of advertising, branding, anything forces everyone into a linear path, right? Like that's what society dictates. This is how you're going to generate a brand, do these things. You got to follow these 10 steps. Everything is that way. And I think that's not normal. And that's what I appreciate about this book, is that it is more creative, I guess, maybe.
Well, that's why I think we spent a lot of time in the book talking about bands like Led Zeppelin, like Tool, because I think you're absolutely right. The way the creative process tends to work is it's a like a stream of consciousness, and it's a mashup of different things. And that's why we talk about give the example of Led Zeppelin, where they sing about Tolkien, but yet it's the music is Mississippi blues, and how it doesn't make any sense. But it's the mashup of those two ideas that forms the brand Led Zeppelin. And I create more like a band creates than I do the way Procter and Gamble creates. And I think the result sometimes can be profound, and sometimes you hit it out of the ballpark, like a brand like Hendrick's. And I feel lucky that in my career, and I think I've earned every step of it, but lucky that I'm allowed to create this way. So,
You know, and I have so many different. I'm going to back up to the music thing, and that's it's actually the next question that I had in here, or maybe a comment. I don't know. This may be more of a conversation than it is a straight interview, so I apologize if it's a little abnormal. But a couple months ago, I had a spoken word hip hop artist from the West Coast join me for an episode, and he's somebody that's followed for a very, very long time, and I enjoy his music, but it also makes me angry on a regular basis because sometimes you get in the car, you're driving home, and you just want to sort of veg out in your commute home. You just want to listen to a bop and just kind of move on. And regularly I have to pull the car over and think about the words that he just said and the way that he put his phrasing together. And, then I come across people like the Idols, which is a British pop punk rock band, whatever you want to call it. And they've got a song that's really simplistic called Mother. And there's this one line, and, I listen to it and I'm like really kind of getting into it. And then hours later, I'm still thinking about one line out of it because of the creativity that went into it, because of the nonlinear fashion. And like I said, I think that creates sticky brands, that creates sticky products, things that you follow the formula and you'll have success. But if you create something that's sticky, you'll have legacy. And those two things aren't the same, at least in my mindset. Number one, what was the reason you were like, you know what, let's write this book? And then maybe a follow-up is for Aaron is, like, how did you get into this? Like, how did you end up writing this book? Like, where did it fall in your lap? And I'll let either one of you guys take the lead there if you want to.
Oh, I'll let Aaron answer both these.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd been aware of Steve for quite a while, or maybe I should rather say I'd been aware of what he'd created. I think most people who are, well, if you're a drinker, you've encountered Steve in the last 20 years. You might not know it. Actually, even these days, I still think back to things and I realize he created them and I didn't even realize it. But, circa, I think 2017, I was saying, who is this crazy guy who everything he touches turns to gold? I've always had an interest in how things go viral, whether it's articles. I mean, I obviously want all my articles to go viral, but more offbeat things. Can a liquor go viral? Well, Steve has proven that they can when he releases stuff from Tamworth Distilling, like Eau de Musk, which was coming out in 2017. It's a beaver anal gland whiskey made from castoreum, a kind of colonial era flavoring. I mean, that sounds insane, and that's perhaps one reason why it went viral. So I interviewed him for VinePair, and we had a really funny conversation. And a part of me couldn't believe he was saying these things because, most people get on the phone with me and are very guarded. And the article itself went viral. It's called "How Do You Make a Booze Brand Go Viral?" And I talked to Steve. And then I think it was February of 2020, right before the pandemic, his agent, Claire, asked if I would come down to Philadelphia and meet with him because he was interested in writing a book. I go into his offices, he's telling me all these insane things about Tolkien and Led Zeppelin and all this insane stuff, and I don't even understand what he's talking about. But I trust this guy because of his success, and I sign on. I say, okay, yeah, let's do this. It took well into the pandemic to sell the book, and then we wrote the entire book during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the nods to Tolkien there. That was, I'm at the beneficial age of, my older brother. If he'd have been a girl, his name would have been Arwen. And so my dad was, an avid and huge fan of Tolkien's work. And so, we kind of grew up in that and got to watch the movies as they came to fruition. And you're exactly right. And I want to go back to you mentioned the castoreum from the beaver anal gland. And if growing up in rural Western Kentucky, you get to learn things about people who may be fur trappers or something along that lines. And you learn that it's not nearly as weird as you might think it is, right? Because you say the word anal gland, you're like, oh my gosh. But then if you understand what that historically has been used for, you're like, okay, so it makes a little bit of difference. But how do you piece these, like, how do you get this knowledge and be like, all right, now let's make whiskey from it? Like, how do you get there?
Well, I think what's interesting about it is, yeah, it's vanilla, right? It's been a vanilla substitute for a long time, and the ideas for the whiskeys come from different sources. Well, the sources are this: we have weekly meetings with our creative and production team. So Tamworth Distilling is in New Hampshire, the agency's in Philadelphia, but we have these weekly, 2-hour brainstorms where we come up with new ideas, and the ideas either come from a story or a book, something I've read. For instance, our Deer Slayer whiskey came from, I just finished James Fenimore Cooper's Deer Slayer book, and I asked my team, can we do anything with venison? Right. So with the beaver gland, I think that idea generated from our biochemist Matt Power, who just has a wealth of historical knowledge as well as chemical knowledge, and knew that it was with a TTB. It's really interesting because if you can prove ethnic or historical usage, they can give you a variance from what's allowed. And so we always joke, we think there's probably a poster of us at the TTB because we're such a monumental pain in their asses, because we're always challenging them with, can we do this? Can we do this? And our ideas, we'll plan something a year in advance because we know it's going to take that long to get it through the regulations. So the ideas come from different sources, but again, like Led Zeppelin, it's a mashup of different ideas, and it's that illogical mashup that I think is probably at the crux or the epicenter of what brand mysticism is about. And it comes from, like we also said, in order to create interesting things, you need to live an interesting life. Because you can't pull ideas from TikTok or from social media. Great ideas come from a deep well of esoteric sources that you've cultivated throughout a lifetime. So what I advocate in the book quite, often and loudly is turn off the damn social media and pick up an old book, an actual book. And that's where the ideas are, because no one else is creating something based on those books. Whereas if you're looking at like what's trending or what hypebeast thing is out there, that's why everything looks the same. That's why everything's boring these days.
That's why everyone's making a Negroni Spagliato right now.
Yes.
That's like the 5th time I've heard that this week. And you're exactly, I mean, it can be, and that's why I kind of differentiated legacy and success earlier, is because you can have success by following those trends because it's just algorithmic. This is what is going to work on a regular basis, but it doesn't. I mean, for all the guilty read.
You froze. Did he freeze for you too, Aaron?
He's frozen for me too.
Frozen.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah. I think my internet's flaky, so sorry about that, guys. But like I said, I was saying is, like, I can read John Grisham over and over and over again, and it's going to be the exact same story, and he's going to have wild success doing that. But it's not going to be a legacy. It's not going to be a Tolkien. It's not going to be, for all of the thing that it can be a J.K. Rowling or somebody who creates something that is moderately unique. And I'd say maybe J.K. Rowling isn't moderately unique because it's just a retelling of a lot of similar stories, but it's not the same book 10 times over.
But the thing is, what's important is, it's not like when I say Tolkien, I'm not saying like pull things out of Tolkien. I'm saying like read a ton of stuff.
Yep.
And then put it together in a unique way. And I keep going back to bands because bands are usually a bunch of, not that well-educated dudes who just put shit together that they like. So I think there's too much. Don't be afraid to mash stuff up that doesn't really make sense, but that you personally think is cool. Because we also say a lot of times, like I don't create products based on research. I create products based on things that I would buy. And I assume there's other people out there like me. So and that's what a good band does that. Like they create stuff that they personally are interested in. Yeah. So
I should also add that,
And
that we have an entire chapter that looks at Steve and Tamworth's creative process going to create these crazier things. And I think that's one of the most fun chapters in the book. It looks at some ideas they had that didn't come to fruition. For instance, a LSD infused whiskey, or a whiskey with the psychedelic toad from south of the border. Stuff that's kind of funny and gimmicky, but doesn't make sense for the ethos of the brand.
well,
And
it's
so-
also that it's illegal. So
Yeah,
well,
that's true.
so that was going to kind of pivot me to a question of some of these psychedelic type drugs are no longer necessarily illegal in some states, right? And so you're going to go try to distill some stuff in another state.
well, they're still illegal to put in alcohol.
Yeah, okay.
There's a separation of church and state. So, cannabis and ayahuasca and shrooms are not allowed to be mixed with alcoholic spirits at this
Yet,
point.
right? We
Yes.
we got to get some
Although you did work on a hemp cannabis.
Oh yeah, we
product.
have it's called the Pathfinder. It's a non-alcoholic distilled spirit made with hemp and root, and there is a THC version of that, which is making its way into test market in the new year. So
It's quite good.
it's very good.
well, I mean that's kind of the overarching characteristic is that you can make a thing, but at the end of the day, is it good? You can be different for different sake. And
Yeah, I was going to say, I always say that, to be honest with you, the creative stuff, coming up with a good brand is actually the easy part.
Mhm.
Making it stick and work in the marketplace is the hard part. And I think that I have people coming to me all the time with ideas, and I'm always like, yeah, I'm sure it's a great idea, but who's funding it, and how does it go to market, and then how do you sustain itself once it gets to market?
Yeah, and that's the other side of the equation. You said earlier that you don't necessarily enjoy, like, or ascribe to a ton of I don't want to say analysis, but market research, right? Market research dictating a lot of decision making ahead of time.
What we do, our bigger clients use research, but we always say that we don't use research to determine what we're going to do. We use research to prove our what do you call it? Our instincts. So we tend, like, we use research to prove that we were right.
Proving a hypothesis.
Prove our hypothesis. Yes, it's a very different way of the way most companies use research, where they use research to determine what to do next. We use it to prove our hypothesis.
Yeah, and in the line of work that I do, we regularly are encouraged to try to use market research to decide whether we even should test the hypothesis.
Yes.
And I'm like, you're wanting us to do market research to test if the idea that we want to implement might be a good idea, so we can implement it and then see what happens, and do additional market research after the fact to say, was it successful? That feels very slow and stupid.
Yeah.
So in you mentioned, Aaron, that you've sort of identified different things that Steven had worked on over time that you knew about, but you didn't know that it was him. And for me, that was Red Camel, right? Like the Red Camel. When I got to that part, I was like, holy shit, I know this one. This like I knew about Hendrick's gin, and I knew about Sailor Jerry, but those were sort of after I'm not a big gin fan, and I saw Sailor Jerry, but rum wasn't I'm from Western Kentucky. It's got to be whiskey. Like, we're whiskey people. This is all we're supposed to do, But I got to Red Camel. I'm like, Kentucky, we do tobacco, and I remember this very, very, very distinctly. And it was, it was the box that you carried when you wanted to be a little bit different, a little bit edgy. You still get to have the parent brand, but what is it like reviving a brand like that? Something that had been around and then disappeared and then brought back.
Well, what year did that come out? We started working on that, I think, in '94. Came out in maybe it was '96. Came out it came out in '96. Anyway, I'd never done that before, right? So it was amazing because the amount of money involved, and the fact that they gave us literal carte blanche to do whatever we wanted. So, and this was before tobacco was under FDA regulation. So there weren't many rules, but at the same time, there were a lot of rules. So it's interesting. We always talk about tobacco as being in the marketing Marine Corps because it's you learn how to do stuff without being able to do stuff. That makes sense. And I feel like that really taught us taught us a lot of really good rules for when we went into the spirits business. But Red Camel was the shit, man. I remember my favorite Red Camel story was I was very good friends with Bob Guccione Jr., who owned Spin Magazine. And Bob called me one day and he said, I'm sitting in a limo with Oasis. And they just saw the Red Camel pack and they freaked the fuck out. And I was like, wow, that is a mic drop moment early in my career where I was like, holy shit. Because at the moment, Oasis was the biggest band in the world.
Yeah, I remember this timeline. Yeah, this is, I don't know, maybe Aaron, you may not be old enough to remember Oasis, but how old are you?
I'm old
Okay.
I'm 43.
Okay, so yeah, similarly, AJ. So you like putting it on the timeline of Red Camel is in 96, 97, 98-ish, and Oasis is hitting right around that time frame. For any 20-something who's watching, they're gonna be like, oh, we have to go those nuts.
Red froze again.
Yes, this internet is the best today. Apologies.
All right. Anyway, hey, so the other thing about
but anyways, like trying to create a modern corollary of what.
The other thing about Red Camel that was pretty amazing was my goal was I wanted Red Camel to be as cool as Diesel brand was. Diesel was the hot fashion brand, the early '90s, and it was all about magazines back then. So I wanted Red Camel to be as like first two spreads of the magazine, like were like the kind of ads people tear out and put on their wall. So when I met my wife, who's 9 years younger than me, she said when she was a student at Occidental, she had Red Camel ads all over her dorm wall. And I thought, holy shit, that's exactly what I was going for. I think it was a little too cool, though, because I think that Red Camel might have been the start of why the government was so excited to regulate cigarettes.
So you may have been so successful that you brought its downfall.
But I tell you, man, for a while, it was like being a pirate. Because you got all this money and flying around in private jets and shooting $1 million photo shoots, and it was a blast. And then it all ended when it went under FDA, which it should have. But for a while, it was like, madman, total crazy. It's fun. All
right. Now I don't even know where to go next, because I had that kind of way down. When I first came across are you there again?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah.
When I first came across or when I first started reading the book and kind of understanding a little bit more about who Steven is and about Aaron's writing and kind of what's going on here, my first thought process was, I had Ari Sussman from Mammoth Distilling on an episode 6 months ago or whatever, and I thought he needs to read this book. Like I need to send this his direction. And then about 3 days later, I see it on his social media. He's reading the same thing because I feel like there's like a kindred spirit, because there's a connection to music, and there's a connection to kind of just being different and being okay with being different. Like that's the thing. So there's a whiskey that correlates to the book, right? And so there's this Dunce whiskey. Let's hear about number one. Why go with the name Dunce? And what's the story on the connection here?
So I'll let Aaron answer the first part, and then I'll answer more about how Dunce, what Dunce is.
Well, as a author, I think this is my 10th book, maybe my 9th. You're always looking for ways to promote the book. And so about a year ago, I said to myself, I co-wrote a book with the guy who owns a distillery. It'd be pretty stupid not to just release, a bottle of alcohol with the book, the first ever co-branded alcohol along with a book. It's not even John. That'd be hard for John Grisham to do. That'd be hard for a lot of guys to do because they don't own a distillery and it's not easy to get alcohol made. So I pitched Steve on the idea, and I think most distillery owners might have just slapped the cover on the bottle as a label, which would have been fine with me. But that got Steve's head spinning, and next thing we know, he's got an entirely new brand. He used brand mysticism to create this branded whiskey for the book. So I'll let him explain how that came to fruition.
Well, there's a chapter in the book about what is it? What's the chapter, Aaron? It's about
it's called it's about people that come to Steve for a consult, and they say, I've bought 100 barrels of MGP, and I'm going to become the next great booze maven like you. What should I do next? And he essentially says, well, you're already lost. How are you going to create the next big brand when you've just sourced whiskey like everyone else on planet Earth? So this brand he created is both a troll on those kind of people, but kind of spinning the idea on its head.
There's the illustration in the book we used to talk about sourcing whiskey is a dunce cap over a whiskey glass. Okay. So we thought it'd be fun to call it dunce, but then the mysticism kicked in, right? And we learned that, so I'm like, okay, so what's the origin of the dunce cap? Why is it called a dunce cap? So do a little research, and it turns out that John Duns Scotus lived in the 1200s. He's a Scotsman, widely considered to be the smartest man alive. And the reason he was smart was he had a conical cap that captured the energy of the heavens and channeled into his brain. So he was using mysticism that he got from the Egyptians with pyramid power, and he was using it to improve his intelligence. Well, obviously it worked because he was the smartest man alive. But this made the Pope jealous. And what did the Pope do? Well, he buried him alive. He killed him. And this is all a true story too, by the way. You look it up. So John Duns Scotus had disciples called Dunsmen who followed him. So the Pope set out on a quest to, flip the script and turn the Duns cap into a symbol of stupidity rather than a symbol of intelligence. I think we've lost John. So I guess, should I keep going? I guess I'll keep going. So
I think we're live still.
We're alive still. So the dunce cap became a symbol of we've totally lost John. Here's John's back. So the dunce cap became a symbol of stupidity when it in fact was a symbol of intelligence. So we thought, what if we took the conical energy? Would that help the finish of a barrel? So we bought barrels from MPG, which first it was starting as a troll, but then we put these giant dunce caps on the barrels in our distillery. And we even went to the extent of, like, we're in a beautiful idyllic setting in the White Mountains along a river. We would even take the the whiskey barrels out into the moonlight by the river, and we put giant dunce caps on them. And we did this for a period of 6 weeks. And the before and after of the tasting is profound. So through mystical energy, conical energy, the ancient energy of the Egyptians, we've finished the dunce whiskey, and it's become this incredible, beautiful bourbon, and it's only $40. So don't be a dummy. Don't be a dunce. Be a dunce. Don't be a fool. Drink dunce. So there you go.
That's
So
brand mysticism for you.
I love this idea that something that started off as like it's kind of like a trolling turned into a whole other thing. Like that's
my whole career. That's my whole life. My whole life is I don't take anything seriously, but I take everything. I take my silliness very seriously.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's true. But it's not a troll if it's true.
There's a whole chapter in the book on the importance of trolling people, by the way.
Yes.
It's, and it doesn't feel like any of the trolling has ever been intentionally harmful to a person, because that's the thing that exists, right? Like trolling is like, oh, we're doing this to like hurt somebody's feelings or just because. And I'm on board with that kind of fuckery. Let's just troll and have fun with it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that seems to kind of parallel the idea of the trolling is this overarching concept of hustle. You may be trolling, but you hustle harder than just about anybody else in the business, right? From at least from what I've read, like I said, I started off with this thought that I'm going to just completely finish this book. And now I'm slowing down and taking notes. And like, this is what I'm taking back to in my professional life, to my team. Like, here's some lessons. Oh, let's implement these as a part of our core function and how we operate. It feels like you've spent a life in your career just outworking, even though it may be somewhat silly.
Well, a lot of that comes from being from Philly. Philly's a shithole. It's a shithole town. No one cares about Philly. And when you're from Philly, you got to work extra hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just, it's like we're always kicked. We're not like New Yorkers like Aaron. We're like, it's a rough and tumble town. Our teams always choke at the end, the whole thing. So anyway, I think a lot of it's like, and there's a chapter in the book about, embrace your shithole town,
mm-hmm.
and use what's in front of you as opposed to, thinking that it's better elsewhere.
So you guys are effectively the Rocky Balboa here, right? Like you're embodying that underdog, smaller, maybe slower mentality, and you just outlast.
I think what it does is it's given us a sort of punk rock sensibility, a DIY sensibility of we're not slick. So the other thing in the book we talk about is we make things ugly on purpose. And what that means is they're authentic to what they are as opposed to trying to be trendy. And I think that a lot of the ugly so for instance, Sailor Jerry looks like your granddad, like it was on your granddad's basement shelf since 1973. Hendrick's looks like it's been around for, since 1870, whatever, because we made it look authentic to what it is as opposed to trying to, to be a trendy, whatever's hot on TikTok right now. A lot of that comes from this underdog idea that, we can't afford to be trendy.
Mm-hmm.
We need to sort of work with what's in front of us. And I think what happens is, and especially in the spirits industry, it works really well because what happens is the brand looks like it's always been there. And then that really builds on the authenticity of it. So I don't know, Aaron, if you want to add to that at all.
No, I mean, I think you look at Steve's brands, Hendrick's gin looks identical to when it came out in 1999. you look at these other, you know, multinational conglomerate-owned brands, they're always fucking with the label. I mean, you know, Wild Turkey's my favorite bourbon. My God, they had a great looking bottle back in the 70s and 80s. Why every 2
Mhm.
years do they redesign it? Now I don't even think there's a turkey on the label. It looks awful. You know,
It's
the reason they do is
embossed
they
on the
keep
bottle
paying.
now.
I
Yeah,
think they were probably afraid of offending turkeys.
maybe. Well, you know, the thing is, and I think Steve's mentioned this before, you know, every 2 years they hire a new, you
Mhm.
know, agency, and those people can't say it already looks perfect. They need to say, okay,
Justify.
here's what you're
Yeah.
paying us millions of dollars for is our redesign,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and the smartest redesign I think a brand like Wild Turkey could do is just go back to their classic look. You know, you look at, say, Old Overholt or Old Granddad, which are not brands Jim Beam puts a lot of money into, and thus they
Mhm.
stick with their old labels. They look fantastic.
You know, a good example of that is Miller High Life hired us
Yeah.
to tell us what was wrong with their brand. And we said, stop trying to be cool. Like, just, and our main project with them was to redo all their packaging. And what we did was we took it back to the classic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's interesting too, because a lot of brands of ours, like for instance, Narragansett beer, everyone assumes it's the original packaging, but it's a mashup of different eras. So
Mhm.
what we did with Miller High Life was it's not what the brand looked like. I mean, we took the best of the classic stuff and we put it together in a very artful way. So a brand like Miller High Life, it was about stop trying to be trendy and be the classic that you are. We always
Right.
said it's the Hellman's mayonnaise of beer, in the sense that it's like, you know, everyone, it's how we got the account, right? We walked in there
Mhm.
with a jar of Hellman's mayonnaise and Heinz tomato ketchup and said, these are supermarket brands, but they're what the top chefs also use.
Yeah.
So you need to start acting like you're the classic that you are. You're a supermarket brand, but stop chasing whatever's happening now and just be the classic. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe it points to like having a clear understanding of what your identity is and not trying to be anything beyond what that is. And you know, you're right. Like grocery stores are reshuffling the way they organize their stuff every 18 months, and brands are redesigning their packaging every 2 to 3 years to try to maintain the eye of the consumer. But if you're a staple brand, you don't have to necessarily do those things. You're not trying to keep up with anybody besides yourself. And if you're not innovating for a good reason, why even do it? You know, like you haven't. And I agree. I would love to see the old Wild Turkey labels come back. I will say that I think this version is slightly better than the last version of the bottle that they had.
Maybe.
But but it's almost too classy for the Wild Turkey brand, right? Like
You know,
in the
was
same
another
vein.
terrible redesign was Rittenhouse Rye. My God, what have they done? Call me, guys. I know you're listening to this. Call me. I'll fix it for you.
They're pretty big donors to this very tiny podcasting platform. They're here all the time. You know, they're like, yeah, we'll give you some money. But and it gets frustrating from a consumer standpoint. It's like, all right, cool. Now I have a whole other thing that I got to keep my eye on. Like if it's my core brand, I got to change my brain and understand where it came from. So you know, I find it interesting. So you started in advertising, and you're now in the spirits game as well as still, you know, doing advertising. In the caveat emptor section, you mentioned that there are a few big players that have been in the market for centuries, and they were all seen as stuff old people drink. I think that was in the gin market, right? Whenever you're doing advertising, is it? I guess maybe it's not, but it feels a little bit like foreshadowing that, you know, you found that in the gin market a long time ago. That's exactly what bourbon was doing too. Like it was the exact same behavior at that pattern, but nobody was interested in bourbon until the mid 2000s. Were there some learnings that you could carry from one to the other?
Uh, gee, I don't know. I feel like by the time when we worked with Hendrick's Gin, I think when we created Hendrick's gin, I think the magic of Hendrick's is that I knew nothing about gin.
Mhm.
I didn't even know how it was made. I knew nothing. And I think that naivete is what helped it be so fresh and original, is that
Mhm.
I had no idea. And for some reason, our very smart client allowed it to go through. Um, but when we got to the bourbon market and what we're doing now, we always joke that it's beards and barrels. And I just feel like it's more a point about the entire craft distilling industry. Is I feel that there's like 2,000 craft distillers in America now,
Beyond that, yeah.
and I know many of them are business loans and they've got everything on the line. I would encourage you to take more chances
Mhm.
and make more interesting liquid, and just don't make what everyone else is making, because you've got to break through and you've got to have a product that is there. There's just hundreds of bourbons out there. What I'm sure you're making a good bourbon. Like what
Mhm.
makes you different? Pay more attention to your marketing. Seriously, and I don't mean this just because I want to sell books, but I would think if you owned a craft distillery, craft brewery, I think my book would be very helpful in helping you understand how to come up with brands. And feel free to text me or reach out to me on on Twitter or Instagram. I'll answer your questions. I mean, I'm very
Mhm.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, it is, like I said, this is a manifesto for advertising and creativity and brand makers. And if you are a craft distiller, craft brewer, I would challenge that it goes beyond just anything spirits related. If you work in
Yeah.
a product branding, product making concept, there's a lot of key learnings, and like that's what I'm doing. I'm absolutely stealing a bunch of the stuff to take to my employees, because I'm not that creative, but I am absolutely not above stealing somebody else's ideas, giving credit obviously and saying, hey,
Yeah.
go buy Steven's book and understand this better, but also let's be intentionally weird, or do whatever it is. And that's, I think, the future of whiskey in North America is going to really hinge on craft distillers, because uh, really, really just one note, and the major producers, like everybody's sort of doing the same things over and over again. And it's the unique offering, it's the regional offering, it's the I'm partnering with my local farmer to bring
Mhm.
back a particular varietal of corn or rye or some other grain that we're not even making whiskey from. I made hemp seed whiskey or whatever, right? Like
Sure.
there's a lot of room for innovation to give yourself your own identity. And it's exactly the message that comes out of this book, is that following other people's steps can be a way to see a level of success, but it won't last. You may make a bundle of money in the next 4 years, but you're not going to exist whenever the bubble finally pops.
Hmm. True.
Um, hmm. I don't know where to go next. Like I said, I have these notes, and now I'm all out of order. Um, oh no. Um, so going back to the camel, right? So I didn't know about French Joe Camel until this book,
Hmm.
and I think it might be more terrifying the Americanized version. And I remember growing up with Joe Camel and being like, "This is not a like." Whenever they're like, "This is advertising to kids," I'm like, "I was a kid when Joe Camel was a camel, and it never interested me." But man, that French Joe Camel is.
That's funny. Um, I always say that RJ Reynolds people were the best people I've worked with, besides the Grant family, who are my main sponsors or main clients now. But the RJ Reynolds
Mhm.
people. It's interesting though. I don't want to get into policy, but I worked with Camel towards the end when they were doing all the flavored cigarettes, and I remember saying to them, "Guys, I think this is really dumb. I think you're just playing with fire." And sure enough, and the hammer came down, right? But you see going on right now in the spirits business, there's some wacky shit going on with these canned RTDs, particular,
Yep.
and soda pop stuff, and I think they got to be careful because what's amazing to me is the spirits industry is the one industry that's actually gotten more lax in the
Mhm.
last 20 years, like advertising on TV and things that were never done before. And you're playing with fire when you're doing like, soda pop brands that I don't know what I don't know what people are thinking, or these like some of the, it's interesting. I do weird flavors,
Yep.
natural flavors from nature that are not definitely like no one's drinking. Kids are not trying to drink anal gland whiskey. But I just feel like as somebody who's gone through that with tobacco, I just think it's a cautionary tale. The other thing that's interesting is with cannabis. I was at some snooty writer event the other night, and I was talking to a cannabis writer, and I just said, "Yeah, with party's over as soon as cannabis goes national."
Mhm.
And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, when it goes national, that's when the FDA is going to come in. When the
Yep.
FDA comes in, it's over because the only people are going to make cannabis anything is going to be Pfizer and Moderna, and all these mom and pop wildcatters doing stuff. It's all just going to be over." So
I would guess that you're right that there's going to be Pfizer and Moderna, but I think there's also going to be RJ Reynolds,
RJ
and
Reynolds, yeah,
every tobacco company
yeah,
is going to push in hard
yeah.
because they're going to have the freedom to do what they used to do with
Dude,
tobacco.
regulatory certainty is what they all want. That's what Wall Street wants.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful in the spirits business, it's funny because we talk about tobacco. Red Camel was fun. Made a ton of money. The ton of money we made is what allowed us to create Sailor Jerry in the first place.
Mhm.
Which, when we sold that, it transformed our company and all that stuff. But what's amazing about tobacco is nobody hates me the way they hated me when I worked on cigarettes, right? And it's a beautiful thing that alcohol has gone through prohibition 90 years ago or 100
Mhm.
years ago. Beautiful thing. Don't fuck it up. Just have some brains, know when to draw the line, and just because that wacky shit you're doing anyway is not gonna. It might make you a short term profit, but it's not a long term brand. Nobody wants that goofy shit.
And then what was the movie in the early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s, like Thank You for Not
Oh
Smoking
yeah. That was
or
my life.
something like
That was my
yeah,
life. Mod
that
Squad,
but and
Virgins of Death. Ah!
it's super. I don't know. I understand the complaint that anyone who maybe grew up in the 50s or 60s or 70s might have about tobacco because no one necessarily knew long term what might happen there. But there is no one from 1980 beyond that didn't know if I smoke this, it's going to harm me. And so that kind of negative perception of tobacco kind of dwindled a little bit, at least at the back end of my generation. But you've talked about music a lot, and
Mhm.
people like pairings. People love pairings. If I am drinking Dunce whiskey, what is the appropriate song to listen to here? Like if I'm gonna sit down, I want to have a drink, I want to think about it. I like the idea
Ah!
of a thinking man's whiskey, a thinking man's book, a thinking man's whatever. Like what am I listening to? Like what's the Steven or the Aaron music selection here?
Oh my God, that's a tough one for me to think off the top of my head. Um,
So we'll make Aaron go first then. Like Aaron, you have to think of us. What are we drinking? What are we listening to while
I
we're
mean, it just occurred to me that we should have someone put together the Spotify brand mysticism playlist
playlist?
because so many songs are mentioned in the book. For
Mhm.
me, writing Brand Mysticism, kind of the soundtrack in my mind, and he's mentioned throughout the book, is Bowie.
Yeah.
You know, I think
Okay.
it's a real Bowie type book. He's a great, you know, inspiration for a lot of the work in the book. And, you know, just like Steven, I'm a big Bowie fan. I don't know what song exactly would be the Dunce song. I'd have to think about that. Maybe Aladdin Sane or something. But I don't know. That for me, Bowie is the patron saint, the musical saint of Brand Mysticism.
I don't know. For some reason, Jane's Addiction, Pigs and Zen was popping into my head with Dunce. I don't know why. And it's like the part of in the middle of the song when he starts talking. Anyway, I don't know. See, Dunce is I don't know. Now you've got me befuddled. I'm gonna have to really think about that.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
turn him into a dunce.
and if it needs to be like 3 or 4 songs, because I mean, obviously, you know, you're not gonna. I mean, if you're sitting down to enjoy a whiskey, you're not necessarily going to drink it all in anywhere between 2.5 and 5 minutes, maybe. So you know, you got some things like we need a playlist for the bottle. Like as you consume the
Yes.
bottle, this goes along with it.
Yes.
I'm on board with that thoroughly. Sometimes you kind of build imagery while you're reading, and a lot of the imagery while I'm reading this book, a lot of the imagery that comes out into my brain are just shots of not scenes that are contained within like SLC Punk. I'm playing this in my brain just as far as kind of the vibe that I got, and I don't know if that's appropriate. I hope I didn't put the wrong kind of imagery on Steven's story and Aaron's writing, but it felt very organized chaos, maybe.
Yes.
Which
yes.
is appropriate.
That is a great controlled chaos is the theme of my life. Yes.
Well, there you go. That's the title of the playlist there, Controlled Chaos.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll back off of the what should I drink with Dunce. What should I listen to while I drink Dunce? What should I listen to at all? Right? Like you obviously have an affinity for music. What is Steven's go-to today?
Oh, I was listening to Tool on my walk to work today. I walk 7 miles a day.
Mm-hmm.
And on my walk to work, I listen to music, and on my walk home, I listen to a book.
Mhm.
So today I was listening to Tool, the song Third Eye, which is amazing. Tool's a big part of the book too. Again, I think it was I just love the complex. He calls it math rock, but it's just very complex and deep themes. So I'm really into metal and punk. And that's kind of what dominates what I listen to is metal and punk all day long.
All right, Aaron. So what's the soundtrack for you right now?
You know, as I've been getting older, I've been revisiting stuff I used to listen to when I was younger. You know, I graduated college and moved to New York in 2001. So I've been listening to the soundtrack of that summer, which was the Strokes' first album. I've been re-listening to a lot of Strokes stuff as I get older because it makes me feel younger.
Does it until you like turn on the classic rock station and then it shows up on classic rock and you're like, shit.
No, until I see how Julian Casablancas is no longer a young, thin, handsome.
I think the one that gets me is my brother has 4 children. They're all, you know, close to adulthood, and they'll show up at a family gathering wearing a Nirvana t-shirt or a Primus t-shirt. I'm like, oh, you guys, and they're like, no, we don't know. This is just like it's a fashion t-shirt now.
Yep.
And I'm like,
so.
Yeah.
Everyone is I'm so disappointed every single time, and I get caught in it.
Whenever I see someone in a Nirvana t-shirt who's in their 20s, I say, "What's your favorite song?" And they can't.
They never have an answer.
They just can't name a single one.
Just give me one, and I'll feel better about it. The only time I got surprised, the only time I ever got surprised, I was in like an antique store, and I'm wearing like a Nirvana t-shirt myself, but it's got like holes in it because it's from a long time ago. And this kid comes up and he was like, "Hey man, I like your shirt." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you know who that is?" And he like rolls off like 5 or 6 of his favorite songs. I'm like, there's a hope for the future generation. There's still some weird kids out there that are like picking up some musical canon that might exist out there. So I don't know. We're closing in on an hour right now. We haven't ran down where can I buy Brand Mysticism, where can I buy Dunce whiskey.
All right, you can buy Brand Mysticism everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere books are sold. You can buy Dunce whiskey via Sealbox, sealbox.com. Is that how you say it? Sealbox, right?
I think that's his website.
SEELBACH.com.
Yeah.
.com. And you can also buy it at our distillery throughout the entire state of New Hampshire and our store in Philadelphia. But if you're outside of New Hampshire or Pennsylvania, then go to sealbox.com.
Yeah,
which has a beautiful box set.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's a House of Tamworth Dunce whiskey Brand Mysticism book package. Fantastic packaging, which I guess it has to be, right? Like you can't have an entire book about being an advertising pro and have terrible packaging, or maybe you can. Maybe that's the troll. Like everything should have been like in brown craft paper with a child's handwriting on it or something, just to kind of one more last shot. But I've enjoyed the imagery within the book. I've enjoyed the marketing materials. Like these are the things that, and you alluded to it earlier, Steven, you wanted to make stuff that someone would, tear out of a magazine and put on their wall, which makes a ton of sense for me whenever I was a kid, because that's what we did. We didn't have the ability to print off an image that we want to put up on our vision board wall or whatever it is that it's called now. But I would guess that a lot of the things that you've done in the last handful of years, last 20, 30 years, or whatever, are now ending up in some kids' college portfolio dream board to be able to create brand marketing going forward. Like there's case studies here. And then Aaron, we didn't even talk about, you've got a ton of other books that are out there. Obviously this is your current project, but like this is not your first rodeo, and it's obvious as well, right? So there's a symbiosis that feels like
my
it's
best
right.
rodeo, but not my first.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, that's
weirdest rodeo.
Weirdest rodeo, yeah.
Yeah,
and they can be the same thing, like somebody's actually riding the bull a full 8 seconds, but they're also wearing like a sequin vest, and that's okay.
Aaron wears a sequin vest.
I don't doubt it. Maybe
he's from New York. He's from New York.
And you just confirmed someone's bias somewhere. It feels like there's a whole lot, maybe a New York versus Philly conversation that should happen as well. But I'm not interested in starting a war today.
Well,
and I'm gonna let this go ahead.
I have to go. I have a whole corridor full of people waiting to get into my office, so I'm going to have to go.
Thank you so much for your time, Steven. I appreciate you joining me. Go take care of business, do the things that you need to do to continue to be successful. Aaron, I assume you do need to drop as well.
I don't have anyone waiting for me, but I do have a cat that looks like he wants to be fed, so that's enough for me.
Okay. I appreciate you joining me as well. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for a copy of the book. And I was able to glean a lot of insight. My employees are so thankful. But I really enjoyed the conversation.
I did
Thank
too.
you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
All right. So kind of doubling back on it, sealbox.com, you can just put in their search function Dunce, and it'll give you the link to their actual product. And you're exactly right. Let's see if I can make this work right now. Maybe that link will work. Maybe it won't. I'll dump a link into the chat. Folk will have the ability to click this. If not, like I said, just go to sealbox.com, hit that link. Book's fantastic. Haven't tried the whiskey yet. Maybe my next order coming from Sealbox. But that'll be it for today. Thanks for tuning in for this offering from the Embellish Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you have to be consuming this on, and leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media at Twitter or Instagram using Embellish Pod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com. And that has all of my links, account, contact details, and so forth. I'll be back again tomorrow with another new offering for you. So until then, cheers and thanks for hanging out.